up? I'm your host DJ Vaz. You're listening to Music Matters. Today we'll be talking about the current state of the music industry, specifically the ways that streaming services have revolutionized the consumption of music. Our conversation will be focused on how the upcoming or underground artists can stand a chance in the face of big labels that still run the show. At least 15% of Spotify has been owned by big labels since its inception in 2006, and due to the nature of how labels own most of Spotify's catalog, they basically have a large say in how things are run and what music reaches the masses. In this sense, not much has changed from the older distribution models, and some things have even come back into play. Pay-for-play on radio stations was banned in the 50s, but the practice is now returning to this sort of Wild West-style era of early internet media consumption, because you can now pay Spotify to place your song on a playlist or have it featured somewhere. The global scale shift to music streaming platforms has fundamentally changed the industry. Albums are no longer sold bundled together with merch packages, and due to the increased popularity of playlisting, even individual tracks are often found out of the context of their respective EPs or albums. It is now easier than ever to make a platinum record because streaming has increased people's overall access to music. My point here is that music has been devalued. There's a deep psychological thing that has happened in the minds of the consumer. There has grown this strong sense of ownership over a large catalog of material, even though the consumer is paying significantly less money to access it. Not only have the costs of production and distribution gone down, but the cost of music has been dramatically reduced because we no longer buy one album for just $10, we buy every album ever made for $10. Today I'll be interviewing my good friend Abe Silver, who owns a recording studio in Ridgewood, Queens. We will be talking about the shifting industry as well as the oversaturation of the market and the plight of the underground artists. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as we did.
Because, the industry in itself, there is a lot of money in it, but it is, like so many things in the hands of not that many people. So, I guess, if we want to start with, what the problem is, I think, is that, of course, it's always been the problem is that, the artists do not get necessarily enough.
So, I'm just wondering, since you own a studio and you're releasing music and you're working with labels and stuff like that, what do you think the implementation of music streaming services have on, the artist, the industry, and the consumer as well?
Well, it completely changes the format in which people are listening to music. If you want to go back to when vinyls were a thing, it was a physical, it was a physical piece of music that you would end up buying. You would have a 12-inch that you could look at and hold in your hands. And, it's literally you have to consider streaming like water. And, it's like a tap, something that you can just turn on passively and not really think about. So the entire format of consumption has changed after that fact. But, it does become difficult because, the money obviously then, thins out a lot. It's funny because, you can now get a platinum record a lot easier also just based off streams, but there's not as much going towards the artist necessarily. You only make around $6,000 per million streams. So, that's not going to be anybody's, sole source of income. That's only the way that I feel like people are getting the most exposure now. And I do think that, it's cool because it's easier to get exposure. That barrier to entry isn't as much. You don't need a whole publishing company and, the whole team to get your album listened to by record labels. You can, the artist, can make an album in your bedroom now and send it out to playlisters and do, a lot of the manpower work that required a whole team of people yourself nowadays.
Well, that's the kind of the nature of the subject is the decrease in value of art, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Since so many things are going down, like the distribution costs, DistroKid is offering $20 a year for unlimited posting, which is half the price of TuneCore's album upload price. So it's anyone can do this. Anybody with $20 in their pocket can put out, as much music as they can make in a year, and they can, promo all of that or do whatever they can. They can get that exposed.
It's been long enough, and we've seen people come out the gate with albums recorded in their bedrooms that are incredibly successful. So, I think the value of something is A, how much of there is out there, and B, the quality of it. And we're seeing an influx of content right now because of how easy it is to create that. And I do think that over time we're going to see kind of a trend towards quality, just because since everybody can do it, like only the good ones I think will end up coming out of this alive. But I do think like just like with the introduction of SoundCloud, like all of the tools needed to just like make like a banger in your room, it was inevitably going to be oversaturated with like that kind of music. It's like the lowest common denominator. I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing. It's it's a facet of the internet, and just like content now being just like so accessible to come out with.
Cheaper access to music means an overall reduced quality.
There's just more of it around.
Yeah.
There's just more of it in the airwaves. It's easier to create, easier to distribute, which is like what reduces value ultimately.
So, I mean, how can we combat the oversaturation of the industry?
I think it's going to balance itself out inevitably. It's just because like people are going to realize like there's a lot of bullshit and like what's actually standing out. In the past, like the oversaturation was because everybody stood out because nothing like that had existed before. But it's just like now that these softwares have been around for quite some time, and what the idea of like a quality album made in home is shifting. The entire kind of mentality of it. I think we did just get over like potentially like, I don't want to call it like a golden age, but it's just like a lot of content came out and a whole new genre of music was birthed out of that massive influx. And so now I do think that is going to be a little bit of time for like reconciliation of that. And I do think like the standout artists are going to be like the big standouts, like like a Frank Ocean, for example. Came out of like that era of like oversaturation, and I think that we're gonna end up seeing more people emerging like that out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar kind of intuition that maximalism to minimalism kind of shift that happens every so often. Frank Ocean to me sort of seems more like a minimalist artist, and I understand why he would come out of that kind of era. So I'm wondering, how, more along the lines of how do we sell our art from within a sea of other artists, selling art. What are ways to get discovered as an upcoming artist?
Damn, I mean, like, that's the big question. I think you have to have a strong vision. I think you have to have a strong identity. I think you have to, I mean, you can break it down into like a kind of a business plan if you want. It's like who exists in a similar sphere around you. What do you offer that's different or better than them? And like what separates you, and like why should people listen to you is going to be a big question to ask yourself. Like, because like if you don't even believe in yourself, then nobody will. So it comes down to that. And then obviously having a team, having like a label that also has a similar vision and that's able to put you on to a larger audience is a great way of doing that. But not everybody has access to that.
I'm wondering, how does the greater need for promotion affect the divide between major label artists and the underground musicians?
Well, obviously the major label people have access to like ad placements and, just have weird other ways of getting their songs placed in places that are going to end up dishing out a lot of royalties. What the small guys have access to that everybody else does is social media, which is arguably, the most powerful tool when it comes to online marketing right now. So,
cool.
Like, if you have a fucking catalog of music that works, like, for like a specific genre or vibe, then you know that you have a market. It's just about understanding what your market is and how to, like, attack it and who else exists in that and how you can be better than them.
Cool. So, in terms of the future and of consumption and distribution, what do you see in terms of general shifts or trends that might happen in the next 10 years?
I'd like to see there be another social media platform like SoundCloud that comes out that does what they did but better, during like their golden age of existing. But, besides from that, it is going to exist on the internet. You're going to have, YouTube's going to be a huge player in it. And fucking Spotify is going to be a huge player in it, and Apple Music's going to be a huge player in it. And it's going to end up being a kind of battle of the juggernauts. I think they're all going to try to inch each other out. There's going to end up being some like exclusive deals when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And I guess since I didn't talk about it at all, you know, like the whole studio aspect of it is, I don't think studios are going anywhere. I think it's dope that, you know, I'm able to open up a room that sounds pretty much like on par with a Manhattan Beach B room.
Yeah.
With, like, you know, obviously you still have to spend a lot, but like it's not hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s worth of equipment anymore. You really just need like a Neumann U87 and a good like pre and a good like compressor, a good converter. You know, there is still going to be a gap between the home studio recording and even a semi-professional studio recording. So I think that like these studios that are offering the same quality of, you know, recording and engineering for a fraction of the price are going to be, you know, the players. Maybe the next guys that come up potentially in a weird way. But it is like it is largely about clout, and that's what I didn't even talk about that this whole time. But like, clout plays a huge part in all this shit.
Yeah.
It's all clout, honestly. It's about developing your clout. Knowing how to harness it.
Yeah, ride it all the way home.
Yeah, exactly. Ride the clout wave.
All right, well that just about wraps it up for tonight. This was Music Matters. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed.